Hello friends, welcome back to another video. This video is basically focused on a blueprint which I have drawn here, which illustrates how I made $450,000 in equity and lost $150,000. And what are the three main key factors that I really learned from this? Because since this is my journey, POV, I really want to just give out all the information that I learned through close to a decade's worth of investing and commercial building and experience of what I've learned, what are the mistakes that I can take forward with me and make sure I avoid those at all costs. And this is something you really will be paying a buyer's agent a certain amount of fee so that they can tell you this information, pour it out. As a youngster like myself, if you're watching and you are wanting to have investment property or wanting to invest something and gain something out of it, this is a blueprint that you should pay complete and utter attention to, because this will demonstrate exactly what I told you of how I made $450,000 and lost $150,000, because it's just that easy to make and lose money at the same time. Now, let me get up to start with. Firstly, the principles, and I'm not trying to be a financial guru here, I'm just trying to sort of tell you exactly how I got to this stage, and which was the first few core principle of investing, which is accumulation of your money and then investing that and then waiting to hold and then selling at a point. There's also points where you should buy and sell the property as well. You can't really pinpoint exactly and time the market exactly, but you get an indication over the years. You'll sort of figure out, and if you don't figure out, that's sort of like where you need to focus on how to figure out exactly when to buy and when to sell, because that's what's going to gain you interest and will gain you more and more potential and extract the most out of the property. So let's first focus on myself, on how I got to it. So I accumulated a huge bunch of money since when I started working back in 2015 all the way until 2019. Whatever sum of money I had, I invested into buying a townhouse in 2019 of $480,000 in a well-developed new suburb with new amenities in ACT, because that's where I used to live at the time. This particular suburb was new, fresh amenities and building fresh big houses. I saw there was a growth for big houses there. The land was big, which at the time I actually didn't know, but now when I introspectively look back into it and see what the potential was, why I gained $450,000 in equity from this property, I figured out that, okay, well, these were the points, which is one of them being fresh amenities, good school, and also a huge big chunks of land, which is getting less and less common now, where people can build big houses. When that happens, you obviously know that can only happen in affluential areas. So that was one of those areas. That's why I bought it there. At the time, I didn't know that, but now when I look back, I'm just like, yep, that's exactly what I'd buy if I had money today. I don't know. Honestly, not today, but like that would be the type of suburb I'd buy into if I had money, and that's what that's what the value used to be, but now it's not. Anyways, fast forward to 2021. I had made $450,000 in equity into this purchase, which honestly, when I did back in the days, I had no idea that I would be making $450,000. No one would have known. It just happened to be so. There is a pattern, and now, like I said, now that I've analyzed the market and I'm trying to understand what exactly and how exactly these things work, I figured out, okay, well, this is the exact reason why there was such a big blow up between 2019 and 2021, which I'll explain further down into the video. But let's just focus into first the timeline. This is what I'm calling the timeline of my blueprint of how those equities happen to be and how they panned out. So I made $450,000 at this time. I was about 23 years old, 24 years old. Still had no idea how exactly I made that. I would be lying if I told you, oh, I knew about this fluke and all that. I didn't. I had no idea. It just happened to make me $450,000, which I'm appreciative and grateful about. Anyways, moving forward, in 2021, I bought a apartment because I had so much equity and I had a fair bit of money, which I had saved from 2019 to 2021. I had saved a fair bit of money, so I had a deposit ready for an apartment which was going to settle in 2023 or happened to delay and settle in 2024. So I knew that, okay, I have a deposit, I can lock it in, and later on I can use the equity here to buy myself that apartment. Now, that's where I made a big mistake, and this is where I'm on track to losing that $150,000. Again, something I didn't know at the time, but now when I look back and analyze in the last year or two, I realize I know exactly now that I would never make this mistake, and I would repeat this incident that I did in 2019 of purchasing that property, and I would avoid that mistake so I don't lose that money and I actually keep gaining that momentum and, you know, come out stronger and buying in properties strongly. I'll again take you through what the reasons are, but let's just focus on the timeline again. So like I said, in 2021, I bought another apartment for $650,000. Then moving forward in 2024, that settled. But in 2023, a year before that, I had gone halves into a property with my dad, which I bought, which means it was bought in joint proprietorship, which means that the two people who buy are joint owners of the property, which means you get 50-50. There's a split to it. So I bought that property, which appreciated to, in today's time now, I've sold it early this year, which appreciated about $175,000. I'll tell you, I kind of knew at that point in 2023, I kind of figured out, okay, well, if I do this with this specific property, if I do this, I'll gain a little bit of money, which I kind of figured out. But in 2025, that property appreciated and I sold $175,000 more, which was great for me because I used that property again in 2025 to buy myself another property, where I'm currently, which hopefully we'll see appreciates as well, knowing that what I know from all the way from 2019 to what I know now, 2025, I'd hope that I'm on the right track for the property to appreciate. But anyways, moving back to that apartment, let's bring back that, because that's what that's a distant memory now, but that's what actually lost me a lot of money and still aches me. So that apartment that I bought for $160,000, I sold in 2024, literally a year when it settled. Same year I sold the property because I overstretched myself with the existing property that I had and the one more property that I bought with the third property. That was the first mistake that I made of overstretching myself, which I'll mention again. I shouldn't have done that. But I thought that, oh yeah, properties are going up, so why not this one as well? And I bought it and became greedy, and I bought another property which I actually had to sell again, like I said, in that same year. I bought it for $650, I sold it for $620. Now you'll be wondering, well, that's a gap of $30,000. How did you lose $150? Let me explain it to you. Actually, it was $120, not $150, but yeah, $30,000 less than what I was talking about. But anyways, let me bring it back to you. How I lost it was the stamp duty, which I'll never get back. Really, you can tax claim it and all that sort of stuff, but you don't get nearly anything back. The deposit that I put in, I sold it for less money, so I clearly lost the deposit. So adding these two together gives you about $70K I lost, and I sold it for $30K less. And then I had to pay for land tax, which is redeemable, insurance is redeemable, as an expense to tax, but still you kind of do pour yourself more money into a property like this, it's a distressed hole, and you just lose heaps of money. And cumulatively, somewhere I lost between $100 to $120,000. So like I said, the purpose of this video isn't to boast about the properties I have or anything of how much I made, because like I mentioned before, when I was doing the certain things, I didn't really know what I was doing, but along the way I learned a lot of things that I know now, and based on that is what I'll tell you how exactly and what exactly you should look for. My belief in property market is actually quite low now, and it's a personal opinion. I don't really know. There'll be a lot of buyers agents who will tell you, oh no, it's still the lie, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. That's not the point of the video. The point of the video is, if you are buying a property, investment property, these are the 3 key factors. There are way more key factors what I learned, but I think these are the most important 3 key factors. If you really understand these 3 points, and the third point is sort of subcategorized because, yeah, it's just a subcategory. So if you understand these 3 points, you'll be very confident that you'll make money on that property, even if you sort of decide to own and occupy it for the first few years and then sell it and then buy something bigger or whatever you want to do with it. I think you would be quite flexible and quite knowledgeable after learning these 3 points. Like I said, there are way more characteristics, which is what sort of, you know, buyers agents tell you that you should look for these things, but I think they try to make it sound more complex than it is. In general, I think these are the 3 things that are reflective of how I made and lost that equity, like I discussed, and, you know, sort of made a decent amount of money so I can buy a complete mortgage free property and don't have to worry about it, so I can focus on other investments or businesses or whatever opportunities that I'm wanting to pursue. So the first point is the type of property. Let's see, back to the timeline, the one common factor within these 4 properties within the life cycle of 2019 to 2025 I've gained is that first things first is that this first property that I bought, like I said, was in a very affluential area. Well, not very affluential, but a decently affluential area with newer amenities, new school, bigger plots of land, and, you know, just new things that came up in 2019. And then I was lucky enough to grab that opportunity and buy that property, which will bring me to my second point. Like I said, the supply and demand tension, which ironically wasn't really there because, like I said, it was a new area, so you would assume that the supply was actually quite high, but still not high enough to match the growth of our population, which is just the story of Australia anyways, and I'm not going to go into it because it's quite an exhaustive topic and I'll leave it to the buyer's agents. Point number 3 is patterns and cyclical cycles. This is something that is very important, and I have a huge amount of knowledge about it now because I've just read and understood the markets in a way that they work and function, how literally every investment class makes money, being houses, gold, Bitcoin, whatever you want to sort of see, and I'll make a separate video about it. But understand that there are patterns out there. There are certain times where you can sort of buy properties and then sell them to make the most amount of, and to grab the most amount of potential from that property. So there are certain patterns and cyclical times where you need to buy the property. So there is times where you shouldn't buy the property, where you should buy the property, which is when the market is fearful, like famously described. So in 2019, back to this one, 2019, the market was pretty low. No one really was looking into buying property. Not a huge amount of population. When I look back, my friends, families, or anyone, like the big investors, yeah, they did whatever they did, but like as a common person, I remember that no one used to even talk about properties. It was just like one thing, like, you know, no one really bought properties until 2021 or 2022 when the properties surged to a pretty high level. It was because the rates by the RBA were low as hell. The market confidence was high because everyone was like, oh yeah, well, properties are going to buy and sell pretty easy because the rates were pretty low. And that all was because there was COVID-19 and the government didn't want the economy to just go into a recession. And that was the exact time when people actually lost confidence in 2020, started 2020, and people were like, oh, this is the crash of market, property prices are going to go down, blah, 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 blah. When I was buying property, heaps of people was telling me that, but I was like, you know what, I need a property anyways. And then what happened was the complete opposite, because the knowledge that people have actually doesn't work in real world. What happens is when this kind of situation happens, then the government, and there's a term called quantitative easing, which I've described in my previous video as well. The government will do anything and everything to loosen the market as much as possible, which is what happened. The opposite of that happened in the last 2 years, which we've been through. The government strictens the market. They tighten the market cash flow as much as possible. They reduce the amount of cash that is going to be in the market, the liquid cash into the market, which i.e. helps people to buy different investments or invest into businesses and all that sort of stuff, which is also called a business cycle and also called global M2. Global M2 means the amount of liquidity there is in the world, but we will more focus on how much liquidity there is into Australian market. And in the first 2 years when I described 2021, 2022, the market, there was a huge amount of liquidity because that's how people were buying things things. Interest rates were extremely low. They were 0.00 at one point, and they were 2.85, which is pretty low still. So the banks lend you more money because you just have a higher borrowing capacity. That's what happened in 2021, and I thought, oh yeah, well, if first property made money, second property, the apartment, obviously will make money. I was wrong, because the type of property I bought was actually pretty shit. It was an apartment. Apartments are not necessarily all shit. It just depends on what your situation is. My situation at the time wasn't to buy an apartment. I still bought an apartment and ended up losing a bunch of money on it because the supply and demand tension, again, in this area was not there. In Canberra, apartment market is pretty dead. People don't really usually invest into apartments because when you can buy land or buy houses, why would you buy apartments? I'm still against apartments. I would probably never buy apartments. Now that I know I work for commercial builders, I just know how they're built. It's nothing to do with how the builder's integrity or their quality is. It's just more to do with the fact that when you're building 100 houses instead of one house, it's as simple as, you know, making one dish at a time or making 100 dishes at a time. You're bound to just screw up those 100, something in that 100 dishes. So you'd rather be focused on one. Then when I gained that knowledge, again, I bought that property in halves with my dad, which I appreciated because it was a house. Appreciated it quite a bit, and I sold it in a market which was tough, but I still appreciated a huge amount. And the last property in 2025 that I've recently bought is again a house, and I bought it in a market that is fearful because people aren't willing to invest into it. I bought it at the very start in January of 2025. People didn't know where interest rates were going, but now when I look back, I'm like, wow, I kind of knew that interest rates were coming down because I've just analyzed and learned about the markets and the way the market is going at the moment. We're technically in a recession, but I'm going to make a video about it as well because recession is sort of more dependent on government bonds, which we'll learn in a different video. But for the purpose of this video, now you understand there are three subnominal sort of things that you should really be focused on, which is type of property, supply and demand tension. Supply and demand tension should really be only focused on apartments. In general, supply and demand tension you shouldn't even worry about because we are so undersupplied with houses.